folks. Hope you're all having a happy, prosperous, healthy, and safe Wednesday, the 16th of October, 2025. Sorry, this is 16th, I meant 15th of October, 2025. Whatever time it is, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, hope you're doing good and doing well. And welcome back to another video where I talk about stuff. In this video, I'm going to go over some of the latest details that we know about how Hamas is undermining the agreement that they signed, along with pretty much all the important parties related to this conflict, including Israel, United States, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, I believe Indonesia, the UK. I mean, all any number of countries, all the players that have any interest. France, I think, even signed on. Everyone signed on to this deal. The Trump plan. There was a big hoo-ha about it in Egypt right after the release of the 20 living hostages. And Hamas has been saying since several days before the release of the 20 living hostages that they do not accept any part of the plan except the very first stage, which is the ceasefire, the withdrawal of the IDF to the 50% line in Gaza, which has been completed. Both those things have been completed. The release of all the hostages, which has not been completed, because we're still waiting for around 20 or so, 21 dead hostages, apparently, to be returned. And the prisoner exchange, the prisoner release from Israeli prisons, the terrorists that were released from Israeli prisons, which has been done. So Israel has held up its end of the bargain completely, and the Palestinians have not. They have not released all of the hostages within 72 hours as agreed, and they have not allowed special forces or any other group to come in and begin finding, help find the remains of the missing dead hostages. So they've already violated the agreement, and they're beginning to undermine it further. They've said that they do not intend to release their weapons to any group other than a Palestinian group. And they've already created, just as I told you that they would, they've already created a new group called the Gaza Security Police, which they are pretending is somehow a different group than Hamas. It is literally just Hamas, using a different name to commit more crimes against their own people. They're literally killing their own people in order to make sure it won't be possible for the international force that's intended to take over to actually do that, because they don't want any international force to take over. They only want an internal Palestinian group to take over control of Gaza, and that's why they're killing their opponents, slaughtering them literally by the hundreds since the IDF withdrew to the 50% line. They've been murdering them in public. There's videos of it spreading all around. Hello there. Good afternoon. Hello. Taiko, Yasha, hi. Good afternoon. I don't know what you're saying. They're on the Polski. Oh, you're Polish? Hello. I don't read Polish, but it's nice to see you. Hello. Shalom from Israel. So the Palestinian, tribes and families that are against Hamas have been attacked and wholesale slaughtered by Hamas, pretending to be the so-called Gaza Security Police, accusing people of collaboration without any court, without any trial, just summary accusations and executions of people who are members of families, and they've been reportedly, according to Palestinian reporters, were very much pro-Hamas Palestinians, and according to Palestinian social media people, were were very much pro-Hamas and were pro-Palestinian, I should say, at the very least, that they are, in fact, just going around and killing their own people. And that is obviously something that Palestinians in Gaza, who do not support Hamas, they don't like that. Obviously, they don't know if they're going to be next. They don't know who's going to be next. There's a huge amount of people um, inside of Gaza and inside of Judea and Samaria who are call themselves Palestinian or identify as Palestinian, who are reporting that Hamas is actually going around and butchering people in Gaza specifically for this purpose. I mean, they're killing men, women, and children. They're killing entire families. They're dragging some of them into these kind of like public execution displays to scare everybody else into falling in line and to not do anything against Hamas, because otherwise the same fate will await them. And that is entirely what we're seeing. So nobody should be surprised by this, because, I mean, I quite literally told you this is what was going to happen when I said that we're going to see Hamas basically be a wolf in sheep's clothing. Yeah? They're just going to change the color of their uniforms or the patch on their uniform, or not even that, just keep wearing the Hamas uniform, but call themselves that verbally. They don't really have to change anything. They just have to pretend that they're another security force, and the useful idiots will believe them that they're, oh, look, they created a new police force. No, it's the same group. They just operating under a different name to fool the useful idiots and the politicians who are weak enough to go along with that make-believe nonsense. So that's what we're seeing. It should be really, really no surprise to you, if you've been following my videos, that this is exactly what's going to happen. And so that's exactly why we're seeing this, right? We know they are lying. We know they are not trustworthy. We know they are just seeking to destroy Israel and kill all the Jews. People often point to, but they changed their charter. No, they haven't. They've moderated, right? They edited their charter to reflect that they would only kill all the Jews in Israel. Ooh, wow. How very noble of them. And at the same time, they keep publishing book after book, authoritative books that are not just random discussions between people with Hamas, but actually authoritative books that are declarative statements about the organization's goals, where they continue to declare actually every Jew is a target around the world. So not just people living in Israel, and yeah, they have every intention to be just as genocidal as they ever were. So if you believe the line that they've changed their charter and somehow that makes them wholesome, which it doesn't, because it still calls for the destruction of a nation in its entirety and the mass slaughter and genocide of everybody living in that nation, which is something of Holocaust proportions, and more, right? Because there are about 7.5 million Jews living in Israel. So that is, first of all, that's disgusting that you would support any organization that seeks to destroy an entire nation of people. Second of all, that intentionally wants to destroy the entire nation of people, isn't forced to do it in an act of self-defense, but actually intentionally seeks to kill every single man, woman, and child just because they happen to be Jewish. That is, you're sick in the head, and you've got bigger problems than the definition of a word. You've got a mental issue, and you need to improve your comprehension of what's right and wrong in the world. You can't just pretend like, oh, I didn't know. No, there is no I didn't know. If you're watching this video, Hamas are a suicidal bunch of people, and they have no intention to be good stewards of the land. The only intention they have is to genocide a people and destroy a country and create a caliphate in this land as part of a larger caliphate, right? They want this entire region to be the Muslim caliphate, and in fact, they want the entire world to be ruled by the caliphate of their choosing. Right? This this is what they want. If you don't know that, well, if you didn't know that, well, now you do. And we are seeing Hamas, again, undermine the process to stop this fighting. They do not want to stop this fighting. Now, here's the critical mistake that you could say they've made, which is they've given back all the living hostages that we know of, that we're aware. And that is a critical mistake because now it means they have no leverage against Israel. Because if they do anything stupid, Israel can just go ahead and demolish them. And yes, it will mean it will be complicated for Israel to do that because now you've got about 500,000 Gazan civilians who have gone back to try to live in their homes or rebuild their homes or whatever in the north end of Gaza, for example, where the IDF is withdrawn from in some parts of northern Gaza. And that makes a huge problem for the IDF if we need to have our fighters go back and clear that land again and recapture it after we just left it several days ago. Why is it a problem? Well, because the IDF does not intend to kill innocent people. So it means we need to vacate them all from there again. We need to do all the same things that we've done before. We need to tell them to get the heck out. Give them all the warnings. Drop leaflets, make phone calls, and do all the emails and everything else. Basically, get them all out, and that's not so easy to do as you might think. Obviously, it took a long time for Israel to basically get everybody out of those combat areas over the past 2 years, and it's not just something we do overnight, unless we just are going to actually do what they call indiscriminate, or widespread, attacks, and using the element of surprise, which is, by the way, the normal thing armies do, but Israel does not, because we want to be, for whatever reason, held. We want to hold ourselves to a higher threshold than the highest thresholds that exist by any international agreements or conventions or treaties about the rules of war. Right? Rules of war do not require an army to give away the element of surprise, but Israel typically does give away the element of surprise every single time that it calls to warn the Arabs, that we're attacking, like the Palestinians or whatever. Every time we call them and say, hey, get out of the way, we're about to bomb your building. So they have advance notice of it. And by the way, they get advance notice sometimes for like an entire day. Like literally Israel and in doing so, we're giving the enemies, not just the people there, but the Hamas itself, because they also see the leaflets. Sometimes they have up to 24 hours to get out of a place. Sometimes it's 4 or 5 hours. Yeah, sometimes it's 1 hour. But guess what? If you know you have 1 hour to leave a place or you are going to die, what are you going to do? Sit there and wait for the bomb to die and cry that you couldn't get out? Or are you going to get the hell out of there? You're going to get the hell out of there. Even if you have to carry somebody, a sick relative or who's infirm and can't really move well, you're going to do whatever the hell you can to get the hell out of there in time. But no, that's not how Hamas wants to play it. Hamas wants as many Palestinians as possible to be dead because that is their that is their main strategy. More dead Palestinians. They don't have a higher strategy, a higher goal in mind. They want as many of their fellow Palestinians to be dead so that they can show it on cameras, claim that Israel genocided people, etc., which is complete and utter nonsense, right? When even, because I just told you, we warned them we're coming, right? So obviously we're not genociding people that we're telling them get out of the way so you don't die. We're also not genociding people when we vaccinate them. Like more than 1 million people in Gaza, received vaccine, whatever, have received vaccines in the last couple of years. Like we vaccinated all the kids in Gaza last year against polio to make sure that they didn't get polio because there was some kind of an outbreak there some years ago, and to make sure that they don't have a repeat of that, Israel went out of its way to literally, during the middle of the fighting, stop the fighting in different places at different times just so we could vaccinate all their kids. That's not exactly the actions of somebody that wants to try to genocide you, right? How many times did the Nazis vaccinate the Jews in death camps? The answer is they didn't. There was one actual example of when Jews were supposedly vaccinated. It was a very small group of people who were basically lab rabbits in a death camp, and some of the Jews there, the German commander thought were scientists, so he put them in charge of creating a vaccine. And the reason was because the Germans were dying of a certain disease in the battlefield. So he put some Jews in charge of creating a vaccine because he knew they were smart at science and medicine. So he ordered some of them to create a vaccine, and this one Jewish scientist happened to figure out a way, but it turns out he actually wasn't even a scientist, with the expertise necessary to do that, but he still figured it out with his team. He figured out he was pretending to be something he's not, but he wanted to save his life, so he did whatever he had to do. And he basically created a real vaccine to give to the Jews in the camp to demonstrate that the vaccine worked. And he did do that, but so it was literally Jews giving Jews vaccines in order to show the Germans that the vaccine worked, which it did. And then they also made a batch of the same, quote unquote, of the same vaccine, but intentionally it wasn't the real vaccine because they wanted to give it to the Germans to make sure that the Germans actually got sicker and died from the diseases that they were already catching in the battlefield. So it was a ruse by the prisoners in the death camp, and it worked because the Germans saw that the vaccines applied to the Jewish prisoners in the death camps worked. They were all becoming healthier. The ones that are, they didn't catch the sickness anymore, and they were healthy or healthier. And then the German commander ordered them to distribute, to make the vaccine available for distribution to the German soldiers, which they did. And they distributed basically a placebo or something that wasn't, helpful in any way. And those were sent to the German soldiers in the field, who then proceeded to drop off like flies because they were expecting a vaccine and they didn't get one. So that's one story where in World War II, Jewish prisoners in concentration camps and death camps actually did receive vaccines because of the work of other fellow Jews. So yes, Jews vaccinated Jews in Nazi death camps at the order of their Nazi commander, and then they killed a whole lot of Nazis who were in the field fighting against the Allies. So yeah, in that sense, as the only one example, but Nazis never vaccinated the Jews and certainly didn't do it en masse. It was a tiny group of people inside of one death camp that got those vaccines as lab rabbits to demonstrate that they were good. But my point in saying that is that Israel is vaccinating or has vaccinated literally all of the kids in Gaza in the last 2 years. They did it during a period of about 1 or 2 months, about a year ago or so, to make sure that the kids in Gaza didn't catch polio. And that's not the kind of thing you do when you're trying to genocide people, right? You're not vaccinating hundreds of thousands of people if you're trying to eliminate them. That doesn't make any sense. On top of that, right, we have evidence, again, from Hamas itself on camera in the last week, saying on multiple occasions, we don't intend to give up our arms, we don't intend to give up our power, and we don't intend to transfer our weapons. Like, they keep going back and forth on the weapons thing, saying, no, we're not going to give up our arms. And if we do give up our arms, we're only going to give it up to another Palestinian group, which, again, they control, right? Because they don't want any outside group to be involved in taking over power and managing the security in Gaza. They want to remain in control as much as possible. And they want to remain in the political process as much as possible. And they said it again and again. And I know Trump has said publicly yesterday that the people in Gaza who are currently holding the guns, specifically Hamas, will be disarmed one way or the other, the easy way or the hard way. And the U.S. will ensure that it happens, even if there might be force, violence used. And he specifically used the word violence. He said it might be violent, perhaps violently, something like that, whatever the actual quote was. But he used the word violence to say that they're absolutely going to disarm. And he said that he spoke to Hamas and that they told him, yes, sir, we're going to disarm, which, of course, I'm sure they didn't say yes, sir to him, but, he likes to use that phrase. So he claims that he spoke to them and that they reassured him that they're absolutely going to disarm. And you can believe that if you want, but I would argue you're being a bit naive if you believe Hamas is actually going to disarm just because they told Trump that they're going to disarm. They still have interests in fighting. They're crazy, and that's why they're doing this. And yes, they don't have any leverage against Israel. And yes, Israel could bomb them to smithereens at this point, since they literally have against Israel at this point, in terms of they don't have any assets, they don't have any humans that they've kidnapped. But this doesn't mean that Israel can just take it easy. No, there's still real threats to Israel inside of Gaza and beyond. Right? For example, um, Hamas has plenty. What is this? Just to state that genocide is just a very wrong term to use. Yeah, of course, there's no genocide happening in Gaza. The only genocide related to this war is that the Gazan Hamas terrorists and Gazan people and other terrorists from Gaza who entered Israel on October 7th literally intended to kill as many Jews and people in Israel as possible, and to take as many people away as hostage and torture them and do all terrible things to them, chop them up and cause them pain and suffering and do just horrific things, especially to the women, but also to children and senior citizens and men of all ages, boys and men and everything. And so the Hamas terrorists are the ones who actually committed a genocide, and that they had an intent to kill, in part or in whole, the Jewish people and all of the people within Israel. Right? That was their intent. Did they succeed? No, they didn't succeed in killing everyone. Did they succeed in killing in part? Yeah, they killed more than 1,200 people or so. Most of whom were Jews, many of whom were not. Many of whom were Muslims or Christians or atheists or people of other religions. There was a man from Nepal that they captured and killed. They killed a bunch of his friends too. They killed them with grenades in a shelter that they were hiding in. They butchered them. And they killed a whole bunch of Thai workers, and they captured a whole lot of Thai workers that they held and abused and treated horribly. And they were released in a separate deal that was made between the government of Thailand and Hamas back in around November or so. I believe November of 2023, right? Or sometime later, actually. But whenever, it was a while ago. But still, they took them captive. Did not treat them well. People who had nothing to do with Israel. They were working in Israel, but they're not Israeli. They weren't Jewish. They weren't, any part of this fight. They were just working in Israel, just like many Palestinians used to work in Israel from Gaza, right? And by the way, many Palestinians still work in Israel from Judea and Samaria. They come into Israel, or they work in Judea and Samaria inside of Israeli-owned factories, and they make a great living there compared to what they would make if they worked in Palestinian shops or businesses or whatever. And that's why they work for the Jewish-owned companies, because the Jewish-owned companies are more successful than theirs for a variety of reasons. So this whole claim that Hamas just wants peace, and all this nonsense that the supposed pro-Palestinian people have made, that all they want is peace, it's a complete utter lie. If all they wanted was peace, first of all, they would celebrate the fact that Trump achieved something that a lot of people thought he could not achieve, which was to get Hamas to release all the hostages. And yeah, we're still waiting for a couple dozen or so, or about 20 or so hostages, 21 hostages to be released. By the way, speaking of that, so these pro-Palestinian, supposedly pro-Palestinian activists, they keep claiming that they're pro-Palestinian and all that, but they can't even acknowledge when somebody does something in their interest, in their supposed interest, like to help end the fighting, right? There's a ceasefire, right? They can't even celebrate that fact. They can't even congratulate Trump for achieving that. Nothing. Like, there is no peace deal right now, but he did manage to achieve getting all the living hostages back to Israel, and to begin the process of getting all of the dead ones back to Israel, even though they're still not all in Israel. But no, they still can't admit that, which belies their entire argument. It demonstrates that it was never about being pro-Palestinian. It was always about just being anti-Israel and specifically anti-Jewish. Whether you like to admit that or not, that's the truth. They just hate Jews, and they don't want to see peace. They don't want to see Jews live in peace in our own homeland. They don't want us to live anywhere. When we don't live in Israel, they tell us go back to Palestine, go back to Israel. When we live here, they said you shouldn't live here. Historically, anti-Semitism is one of the most illogical, idiotic things ever, because all it really is a way for people who are doing bad things to distract from their own terrible actions, so that they don't have to look in the mirror and say, you screwed up, it's your fault, now fix this, right? It's a distraction, it's a deflection. That's why dictators around the world have historically used anti-Semitism, and even to this day, dictators throughout the Middle East, even the ones, some of them who have made peace with Israel, even continue to this day to sometimes use Israel as a scapegoat to deflect from the real complaints that their own people have about them. It's an easiest thing to do, just scapegoat the Jews. And when people say, well, Jews have been kicked out of 109 countries. Yeah, Jews have been kicked out of 109 countries because of that exact same anti-Semitism, right? It's a convenient scapegoat. Oh, we're going to blame the Jews for everything, so let's kick them out of our country. That'll solve all our problems. And of course, then it doesn't solve all their problems. In fact, it makes their countries even worse off, because historically and statistically, you can look this up, whenever Jews have been kicked out of a country, in a fairly short period of time, that country's economics and quality of life falls pretty hard. Why? Because Jews typically have increased the quality of life in the countries that they live in by starting successful commercial businesses, by improving diplomatic relations between countries, by doing all kinds of wonderful things, by advancing civil rights, by doing all kinds of great things for those countries and those communities and those societies. But people refuse to acknowledge their achievements because they just want to blame the Jews for everything. So then you have idiots like Candace Owen or Tucker Carlson in every kind of country. There's always idiots like that in every country. Those are just two Americans that people tend to know these days. They're just two stellar examples of anti-Semitic idiots who just will blame the Jews for anything. And of course, the reason they do it is because money. They're being paid by Qatar or other forces, and we know that they've gotten money from Qatar. We have the receipts. We've seen them. We've all seen them. I hope you've seen them. If you haven't, you can go look them up. You can literally see Tucker, got money from, to fund his network, and from sources that are obviously very anti-Israel and anti-Jewish. And Candace Owens also, we know that she's getting paid as well. So yeah, she's scum, and he's scum, and all these anti-Semites are scum. And that's how it is, and that's why you keep getting reinforcement of these idiots like in Hamas, who keep thinking, oh, we can keep doing this, because remember, they're like a mafia, so they keep thinking, oh, we can keep running this mafia game as long as we can do the long con and keep getting money for our grift, and just keep attacking the Jews occasionally and keep getting money from supporters who just hate Jews, right? And maybe they're just too afraid to say it publicly, or maybe they say they hate Zionists, which is the same thing, because at least 95% or more of Jews around the world are Zionists. Why? What is Zionism? Zionism is literally the right of the Jews to live in our homeland, just like any ethnic group or nation or people should have the rights to live in their homeland, right? And yeah, so that's, it's a stupid word game that they think somehow makes them sound smart. And like, ooh, I'm differentiating in my argument. No, you're not differentiating. You're just saying you hate Jews, and you're just saying it by saying I hate Zionists. It's the same bloody thing, right? Jews believe that Jews have the right to live in the Jewish homeland. The ones that don't are idiots, and Jews consider them to be idiots. And by the way, many non-Jews also consider them to be idiots, namely those non-Jews who are Zionists. They believe in the right of Jews to live in the Jewish homeland, which is Israel, Judea and Samaria included. In fact, Judea and Samaria are really the original homeland of the Jews. So when you hear the term the West Bank is Judea and Samaria. That is the homeland of the Jews, and the Palestinians are occupying it. It is occupied territory in the sense that the Palestinians are occupying it. It's not occupied by the Jews. It's our homeland. How can we be occupying our own homeland? It's completely retarded to even suggest it. But that's the situation we're in. We live in a clown world full of retards who don't know a goddamn thing about history, who are so brainwashed into believing the nonsense that when you present them with facts to their face, they just deny it, or they say the source is Jewish or the source is Zionist, or all these crazy claims. You pull up a fact for them on ChatGPT or Google Gemini, and they'll say, "Oh, those are owned by Jews." Are you kidding me? Like, okay, go search it up on Grok. That's owned by Elon Musk. Oh, he's a Zionist. I mean, there's no logic that can get through to such broken brain people, right? They're not thinking right. They are very not well in the head, and that's all the evidence you need is just to engage in a debate with any of these fools. But it's sad to see, and one of the many things Israel has to do is to increase the awareness of the situation. Mostly harmless, and reasonable people who've maybe been pushed a little bit to the wrong side by all the brainwashing that they constantly get from, Qatari-influenced sources of information. And I say Qatar, they're not the only ones, but they are a massive key contributor to the poisoning of the minds over the last 40 or so years. They've been spending billions and billions of dollars to poison the minds of children and young adults in schools, colleges, universities throughout the United States and Europe to literally hate their own country. Right? They're busily continuing the old Soviet system of destroying the United States from the inside by creating useful idiots, right? Useful idiots in the first generation are taught to, be confused and basically not know whether or not to trust their own governments and to begin to hate their own governments. The second generation are taught to not just hate their own governments, but to, and continue questioning all the facts and everything that they've been taught, and to hate their own values, okay, and to want to seek the destruction of their own country. And the third and fourth generation, which is exactly what the Soviets did the first two generations of that. Then the Soviets went out of business, but the Russians are continuing after them. And the Qataris saw an opportunity to partner up with that and keep funding more, misinformation and miseducation to teach them not to just hate their own country and seek its destruction, but to actively participate in demonstrations against the country and violent actions against the people of their own country, especially their intended targets, like Jews, right? That's why we see an increased number of attacks in Western cultures that literally are banked by, groups that have direct ties to Hamas or Qatar or other, nefarious sources that are literally undermining the West from the inside, right? And that's why it's going to take several generations or more to actually undo all of that brainwashing and actually have it ingrained in their society to not want to do that and to live in peace with the West. But the thing is, it's not going to happen anytime soon, because you would actually need to have a reform of Islam first. And that's not going to happen anytime soon either, unfortunately, right? Yeah, there are some radicals who are thinking outside the box. And I use the term radicals because the ones who are actually seeking reform in Islam are the radicals. The ones who are just seeking to, be violent, they're actually not radical Islamists. They're literal Islamists. They are doing what the Quran commands them to do, literally. Right? So Hamas, they're not radicals. They're extremely violent, but they're not radicals when it comes to their religion. They're extremely conservative. Right? They take an extremely conservative, literalist view of their religion. Right? So that is one of the many ways that Hamas is using to continue this warfare, right? Is they are relying on their friends around the world to continue to brainwash people and to continue to cause direct actions like protests and attacks and other things like that in order to harm the West from the inside and ultimately destroy the West from the inside. Like, that is absolutely a goal that they're trying to do. the way, big holes in the sky, big holes in the ground, all over the place. What am I walking on? Here in the sandy land of the Middle East. I'm in a place right now with a lot of sand. But yeah. Anyway, so Hamas, like I said, is undermining the entire plan. They do not intend to keep their word. They've said as much, right? And if you think they're going to honor their word, you're kidding yourself. There's no other way to say it. You are literally kidding yourself. They are very clear in their intention to not honor the agreement. I know Trump wants to believe that they're going to follow the agreement and that they're going to disarm and all that, but they made it very clear they're not going to do that at all. So if you think they're going to, you have not been reading the tea leaves correctly. What can I tell you? And that's okay. Stick to my channel, subscribe here, like here, follow what I'm doing. You will get a much better sense of what's going on because I lay out the facts for you. I've been involved in this conflict in one way or another for a very, very long time, far more than pretty much any of these YouTuber influencers out there, many of whom are fantastic, by the way, and they do an amazing job of communicating and getting large followings and all that stuff, and they do a great job of exposing the ridiculous lies and debunking things and debating people. I give them lots of credit. They really are doing, I mean, like for people who haven't been involved in this for as long as I have, they are fast learners who clearly know a lot. Like they're good at learning this topic. Many of them, look, they've been living their lives outside of this conflict, but of course it always affected them in one way or another, even if they never were directly involved in it, but they were somehow mildly aware of it, at least, if not more. But they've become fast students of this topic and have learned a lot about this topic, and have done a great job of rapidly increasing their knowledge levels about this topic. So my hat's off to them, and I give them a lot of credit for what they've done. It's just that I've been doing this for more than several decades and written authoritative books about the topic, etc. So I come at it from a slightly different perspective, and I'm much more concerned about the accuracy of even the minutia of the details, and actually understanding and analyzing things from that perspective even more. Rage baiting and clickbaiting, whatever, getting people to react or whatever online is fun and all that, and I'm sure it's great for views and for business if you're like living off of YouTube. But from my point of view, I want to present to you the most accurate information that's possible because A, I know it. I don't know everything, but I know this topic extremely well, and can present to you the topic and the issues hopefully clearly, and to make it make sense for you so that you can learn from it and walk away with much more knowledge than you had before you saw the video that I present, right? Before I see any topic I talk about in this particular area of my expertise. So again, I salute all of my fellow pro-Israel YouTubers and TikTokers and Instagrammers and social media influencers and all that. I think they're doing a really a great job in many cases, and in some cases less of a great job, but they're still making an effort, which I applaud because we need more voices out there doing the necessary things to get the word out. But there are some people who have a lot more experience in this area in all kinds of spheres, from academic to military to diplomatic, political, etc. That's where people like me come in. That's what I've been doing for a very, very, very long time. So I'm happy to bring this information to you to the best of my knowledge and the best of my ability. Keep you up to date about what's happening and really dive deep into the weeds and hit the nuances, explain to you the actual meaning and importance and impact of all these statements and actions that are happening in this situation, right? So if you are of the mindset that you think that this deal with Trump is going to actually last and that the war is really over. Again, like I said, unfortunately, it is probably not over. We are very likely going to see more clashes. We've already really seen a couple of actions that have broken the deal, like I said earlier in this video. If you came in late, go watch the beginning and see it. You heard me talk about it. We've already seen that there's going to be flare-ups even between Israeli forces and forces in Gaza, whether it's Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad or whoever else, right? We've already seen various families fighting with Hamas, trying to protect themselves. We've already seen the Al Shabaab family have to withdraw from some of the areas that they controlled before and go back to areas that they control better. And hopefully, they will continue being a thorn in the side of Hamas and doing whatever they can to cause disruptions among the Hamas until the Hamas actually surrenders. But for now, Hamas has said they're not going to surrender. So it is frankly foolish to believe that they will. Now you might want to believe that they will, but that doesn't make it so. You might want to think, oh, they said they're going to give up their weapons and they promised it to Trump, so of course they're going to abide by their agreement. Well, it doesn't work like that. These are not people that you can just believe. Okay, let me put it this way: do the babysitting test. Okay, very simple. Who would you rather have babysit your babies? You know, would you let the Hamas babysit your babies? Would you? I wouldn't. Would you let Palestinian Islamic Jihad babysit your babies? You have to be crazy to let any of these groups babysit your babies. What about the DFLP or the PFLP or all these other disgusting hate groups, Al Qaeda, Islamic State, etc., etc.? Would you let them babysit your babies? No, why not? Well, because they're violent, they're extremely violent, and they would do horrible things in all likelihood to your kids, right? So no, you shouldn't do that, right? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. On the other hand, well, so if you, like I said, if you believe that this war is over, really, I hate to tell you, it's not. Okay, first of all, we're still waiting for many of the bodies to come back home. Like more than 20 bodies still have yet to be released. And I remind you, when they released the Bibas babies and their mother Shira, when they first sent back Shira's body, it wasn't Shira's body. They sent back some other person's body in a coffin and made Israel discover that it was not her. They do that because partly they're idiots and partly because they know what they're doing and they're causing more psychological harm to the family of the grieving, the grieving family of the fallen, right? Of the dead hostages. And that's exactly what they did again yesterday. They sent back a body that was not the body that they claimed it was. And they knew, obviously, that Israel's forensic experts would figure this out. And we did. And they nevertheless sent it because they knew, that it would cause problems in the agreement because they're breaking the agreement. They haven't gotten out all the hostages within 72 hours, including the ones that they know where they are, which is what we're supposed to have done. And now we're well past that 72-hour mark and they still haven't done it. And they knew that it would cause more pain and suffering for the families of the dead hostage that they claimed it was when it clearly was not. And so that is just another earmark of the kind of terror that these people commit because they're psychopaths, right? They are absolutely evil in their actions, in what they're doing to harm people, right? That is their goal. They want to destroy Israel. They want to kill as many people in Israel as possible, literally everyone, if they could, right? They want to completely destroy this country just because there are Jews living here and just because it's a country governed by Jews. And they're completely psychopath, right? Again, that does not make them radical. They're not. They are conservative, literal Islamists. They believe in the letter of the Quran and they do not veer from the most conservative interpretations of anything in it, right? Of course, many of them sin according to their own Quran. They do things that they're not supposed to do. We know that. They know that. But in terms of their politics, they stick to the most conservative, violent, extremist views of the Quran possible. Right? The actual radicals, like I say, are the ones who are willing to reform, or the ones who have already reformed, or the ones who have left the religion. Right? They call them apostates. It doesn't matter if you've just reformed your view a little bit and you've gotten a bit softer, but you still practice Islam. They'll still call you an apostate. Or if you've left the religion completely, obviously they consider you an apostate. Or if you've changed religion, you're an apostate, right? And being an apostate, apostasy is punishable by death under Islam, right? That is a sin, a crime, a capital crime, and that is something that they don't take lightly. So, if you think for some reason that it's all hunky dory in Hamastan, also known as Gaza, and that they are, just looking to live in peace side by side with Israel. No, they're not. All you got to do is look at what they've been doing to their own people in the last. What is that? What does it say? In the last few days, right? Since Israel left half of the Gaza Strip, once the ceasefire was in place, and we began after we already withdrew to the 50% line, and they just began wholesale slaughtering their own people, right? They're not interested in peace. I'm sorry to tell you, there's a very high probability that we will re-enter places in Gaza that we've just withdrawn from in the coming days, weeks, or months. It is extremely probable. The only thing that will change that is if Hamas actually, publicly or privately, gives up its weapons and withdraws from power. There is no other possibility for this, right? This isn't a 50-50 situation. Now, yeah, you might have some situations where a politician, maybe Trump, will tell Bibi, don't go in right away, give them some time to do this, etc. But he himself said just yesterday in a cabinet meeting at the White House, answering the press very directly, Hamas will give up their weapons, and if they don't do it willingly, we will make them do it, perhaps violently, right? Meaning he is saying he's doubling down on his comments that he made at the press conference announcing this entire deal when he was standing there next to Bibi Netanyahu, and he said, this is the plan, and this is how the war ends, and if everybody sticks to it, it'll be great, and if not, Hamas, if Hamas breaks any part of the deal, Israel will have the United States' full backing to do whatever it has to do to finish the job right and get rid of these guys. Now, he doubled down on that again yesterday. He made it very clear yesterday. He said, this is not going to be a situation in which Hamas gets to keep their weapons. They are going to disarm. Now we'll have to see. Time will tell. Will they actually disarm them, right? Will that actually happen? We're not going to know that until we actually see them giving up their weapons. But for now, they have not disarmed. For now, they still want to negotiate, which is not the deal. They've already signed the deal, which means there is no negotiation at this point, right? They're supposed to just give up their guns, but they haven't yet, and that is a problem. It is, in fact, a huge problem, right? Because this isn't some small thing. Now, you can say, well, they're just doing it for grandstanding or posturing. It doesn't matter what they're doing it for. It matters that they're doing it. It matters that they're violating the agreement. It doesn't matter why they're violating the agreement. So, I'm an optimist on this sense. Am I cautiously optimistic that they may follow through? Again, I want to be cautiously optimistic, sure, but I don't trust them. Why would I? You'd be insane to trust them, especially if you lived through, this recent 2-year war and the many wars they have launched against our country, right? It is absolutely insane to believe them, to take them at their word. For decades, they've been lying to us. Decades, like literally since 4 decades, since 1988 when they were established. right? So literally 37 years or so, they've been lying to us through their teeth, right? And doing horrible, violent things against us because they want to destroy our country, right? And so, yeah, the prospect right now is that hopefully we will get back all the dead bodies, but we still have yet to see that happen. So there are still more than 20 families waiting to receive the remains of their loved ones. Until that happens, that is the only point of leverage that you could say that Hamas currently holds. But Israel still has to be very careful, and Israelis still have to be very careful, especially those living in areas where they might be, um, you know, caught. Let's say in the West Bank or so, where something bad might happen to them if they're, God forbid, attacked or kidnapped there, and that would be very, very bad. So Israel has to redouble its efforts to stay secure because we cannot trust that these people, are done fighting us since they clearly have said they're not. And we have to be extra careful not to let down our guard anywhere near Gaza, so that these people cannot just do this again. Um, and we have to make sure that if they don't stick to the deal, that they pay the price, so that they absolutely will not do this again. Right? And that's not going to happen on a wing and a prayer. That's going to happen by being strong, standing up to them, not allowing them to pussyfoot around the issue, and to pretend like, oh no, these are minor violations that don't matter. No, these violations matter. Every little violation matters. Okay, if they don't stick to the end of the bargain, there is no bargain. Therefore, Israel has to do what it has to do to get rid of these people completely and entirely. And it looks more and more like it's going to have to happen sooner rather than later. So, that said, thanks again for being here. Appreciate it. Hope you all doing well. I wish you all the best. And yeah, by all means, please do like and subscribe and share and comment here. Fantastic. I appreciate it very much. Let's keep this thing growing. And yeah, I think I'll save the bigger announcement for a later date. But yeah, there are some plans in the work to make some bigger impact through my efforts here on YouTube and elsewhere. So that's it for now. Take care. See you in the next one. Peace and shalom.